Things Podcast. Hey, Phantomaniacs, welcome to the newest episode of the Needless Things Podcast, where we talk about toys, movies, music, and all manner of pop culture dorkery. I am your host, Dave, and man, I have had just the absolute best couple of days. It's unbelievable how simple and good life can be. So I've worked Monday and Tuesday night. Those were not the best couple of days, obviously. But then Wednesday, got up. My son, who is going into middle school, has been doing a sort of middle school summer camp type thing in the mornings, where he goes and does cool projects that are kind of demonstrative of what he's going to be doing in middle school and gets used to the school. Like, it's actually a really cool concept. He's been really enjoying it and is super excited now. And I wish I had had the opportunity to do that before I went into middle school. It would have been nice to get familiar with the building and everything and the personnel before that first shocking day of 6th grade. But anyway, that's what's been going on. So yesterday, he got home. Obviously, I'm sleeping because I've been working nights. He gets home, and he, who is way more up on video game stuff than I am at this point, has discovered there is a very special event going on at the Best Buy out at Mall of Georgia, where you can go and play Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 on the site, and it's not coming out for like another month. So this was very cool, and I was into this idea. I Mall of Georgia is a bit of a hike, but we do go out there from time to time because there's lots of stuff out there to occupy. Like, you can spend a day out there because they've got Second and Charles, where you can go and look at records and toys and video games and basically everything. It's my current favorite retail store. And then you've also got Target out there. There's a Walmart out there that's far, far nicer than any Walmarts that are around our area. They actually keep stuff stocked. As a matter of fact, I found the Bob Backlund exclusive figure that is only available at Walmart out there, and then a new Basic Series Randy Savage that's very WCW-rific. I don't know that it is actual WCW macho, but it looks that way. I'll have to look up that gear and find out. But anyway, I'm collecting the WCW Elites, so that was a good find for me. And they had plenty of other new stuff, too, including these incredible new Fortnite figures. Now, I don't play Fortnite at all, and even Phantom Jr. isn't playing it as much right now because I think it's just gotten kind of stale, but he still loves the character designs and everything, and there are brand new 6-ish inch scale. They're about the same size as the Black Series figures, Fortnite figures from Jazzwares of all people. Now, I'm usually pretty wary of Jazzwares because in the past their stuff has just fallen apart. They've had quality control problems. They usually have pretty good designs, but the figures just aren't great. These look amazing. They come with like 9 accessories each, guns and pickaxes and backpacks and grenades and all kinds of business. They blew my mind. The packaging was beautiful. It was one of those toy finds where I walked in, I didn't even know this thing was going to exist, and it just caught my eye and blew me away, so I grabbed all 4 of them for him. Because he's a good kid. He works hard, he behaves, and when I see something like that I know he's going to love, I just can't help myself. So I grabbed all 4 because he and his mom stayed out in the car while I ran into Walmart because we all kind of hate Walmart. But I had to go in there to see if they had the Jabba's Palace playset. The vintage collection that's out now that's Walmart exclusive because Hasbro is stupid and won't stop making things Walmart exclusive, even though Walmart is the devil and the worst place in the entire world. But anyway, found the Fortnite figs in the glorious, like, well-maintained, well-stocked Walmart. Went back out to the car, went and had some barbecue, ran all over Mall of Georgia land, went and played Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, and it's great. I haven't had that much fun playing a video game. As much as I loved the Resident Evil 2 remake, it was cool, but it didn't have that kinetic God of War button mashy fighting fun, I guess. So we're pre-ordering that immediately, and I'm going to do a full write-up on our experience playing the demo on needlessthingspodcast.com. That should go up next week. But we just had a great day. We went to the Think Geek store. They had 25% off action figures, and they had all the new action figures that I can't find anywhere else. I got the new Nun Retro NECA figure. I got some of the new Mego horror figures that I haven't seen anywhere else, and I don't want to pay for shipping. That Think Geek store, if you've got one near you, it's great. It really, really is. And the that Mall of Georgia one, the staff is fantastic. As a matter of fact, I saw somebody who was recognizably an authority figure, and he turned out to be the store manager, and I went and told him that his store is great, his staff is great. We always have a wonderful experience in there. But yeah, 25% off action figures makes the Think Geek markup price, it brings it down, or I guess Think Geek / GameStop markup price, it brings it down to less than MSRP, so it's worth picking stuff up there. But usually it's worth picking stuff up there anyway, because they get it long before Walmart and Target, and it doesn't get smashed and destroyed, and I have sticky, nasty doo-doo fingers put all over it before you get to it. So there you go. We just really had a wonderful day yesterday. And then last night, I recorded today's episode. I came home and I talked to Bobby Nash, award-winning Bobby Nash, about cartoons for a little over an hour. We just had a great conversation, and as with every podcast ever, we barely scratched the surface, but we had a wonderful conversation about kind of the early era of cartoons and then into the 80s, which, of course, is both of our sweet spots. Great conversation. You're going to enjoy it. But before we get to the fun stuff, well, it's all fun stuff, right? Before we get to the non-business stuff, I got a little business to take care of, and that is last week I attempted to run a contest for Bobby Nash's Snow series for a digital download, and it just didn't, I didn't get it over right, or I tried to use Twitter, which I hate almost as much as I hate Walmart. So that was silly, and I shouldn't have done it. So instead, what we're going to do this week, we have a digital download of the Snow series from the award-winning Bobby Nash. This is like his signature book. We talk about it a little bit in a minute here. You can get this completely free. We will send you the download code, and you will get it, and you will be able to listen to the audio versions of Snowfalls, Snowstorm, and Snow Drive, which are excellent thriller-type books that are fast-paced, action-packed, cool, like crime stuff. But you can get them totally free. All you have to do is go to any of Needless Things' social media outlets, and that includes my Facebook account, Dave West. That includes Needless Things on Facebook. That includes Needless Things on Twitter, Needless Things on Instagram, Phantom Troublemaker on Instagram and Twitter. Any of the associated Needless Things accounts, there is going to be a pinned post. I'm not sure if you can do that on Instagram, but if you search through things, I'm sure you can see it. But you're going to be looking for the post that relates to Bobby Nash's Snow series. You'll know it when you see it. All you have to do is repost it, share it, retweet it, whatever. Just like it and share that thing, and we're going to pick a random winner in 2 weeks, because I'm on vacation next week. In 2 weeks, we are going to pick a winner to get a free copy of the Snow series audio version. So get out there, check out our social media, and repost, retweet, like, do all the stuff, and we'll pick a random person to receive that for free. We'll just email you the code, and you're done. It's easy. It's very easy. And before we get into Toon Time with Bobby Nash, I want to talk to you a little bit about that vacation that I just mentioned. I'm pulling up the website right now, which is AugustaToyAndComicShow.com. Now, you can also go to Facebook and find them. You can go to Instagram and find them. Again, we're all adults here. We know how to use Google. But the Augusta Toy and Comic Show and Joe Fest, it's funny to me how just like Toylanta, started off as the Great Atlanta Toy Convention, and Joe Lanta combined into Toy Lanta. Again, something similar seems to be happening here, where you have a toy and comic show and a G.I. Joe show that are joining forces. So what we've got here is a fantastic, like, day and a half show, I guess it is. It's in Augusta, Georgia. And the reason that I have ended up going is it's on the way to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where me and Phantom Jr. are going to be going. Poor old Mrs. Troublemaker has to stay home with the dogs because we have nobody to watch our 4 insane dogs, or our house for that matter. So me and Phantom Jr. are hitting the road, and our first stop is the Augusta Toy and Comic Show. This is incredible. I'm going to have a full post about it on needlessthingspodcast.com this coming Monday, June the 17th. But what you need to know is that it is Friday and Saturday. That is June 21st and 22nd in Augusta, Georgia. It is at the Augusta Doubletree Perimeter Hotel. And it looks awesome because it's a big old toy show. As a matter of fact, they just released the map of the vendor room and all the vendors that are going to be in there. But this thing has incredible guests as well because it's got folks that worked on the G.I. Joe toy line that are going to be there. Sergeant Slaughter is going to be there. I get to reconnect with one of the first celebrities I ever met years ago. They've got panels. They've got the schedule up on AugustaToyAndComicShow.com right now. But some of these guests are absolutely incredible. Kirk Bazigian, who is the... You know, I often refer to Larry Hama as the father of G.I. Joe, and it's true. He created all the backgrounds and all the stories for the comics, but Kirk Bazigian is the guy. Bazigian, I don't know. I'll find out when I meet him. He created the Joe line itself. He was the Hasbro executive who made G.I. Joe a Real American Hero happen. You also have Keona Young, who voiced Storm Shadow on G.I. Joe a Real American Hero, but also was Woo on Deadwood, which I did not realize until I started looking into this. But he's been in tons and tons and tons of other stuff, like many voice actors from the 80s. Awesome guest. I'm super excited to meet this guy. One cool thing that I like about the Augusta Toy and Comic Show is if you go to the website, they've got the pricing for the guests up here, so you know beforehand. For instance, Keona Young, $60 for the photo op and the autograph, $40 for the autograph, $40 for the photo op. So it's very straightforward. You can figure out how much you need to have. They've got tons of cosplayers are going to be here. Our pals Brian and Sarah and Noel and Rebecca from the Finest, a G.I. Joe cosplay group, are going to be in Augusta. Matter of fact, our pal Bobby Nash is going to be there wandering around. He is not there in an official capacity, but he's going to be there hanging out because the show looks awesome. Hank Garrett, who voiced Dial Tone on the G.I. Joe show, is going to be there. Larry Hama is going to be there. And you know what? I'm sitting here looking at the pronunciation, and it might be Hama. I'm so bad with these written names. And the really sad thing is I've done 2 panels with Larry Hama at Dragon Con, which you can find in the Needless Things podcast archives. But he is going to be there. You know who else is going to be there? This one I love. Ron Rudat, who is the first person I ever knew to have a G.I. Joe. Like, the first time I was aware that they named Joes after people was Dusty, who was named after Ron Rudat, because his name is Dusty Tater. I can't remember his first name right now, but it's an anagram for Ron Rudat. And it's great. I love that. And actually, the figure of Leatherneck was based on Rudat's appearance. But he had a big hand in the G.I. Joe line. He designed every character from 81 to 86 and also worked on the Hasbro WWF line, which, as you guys may know, is kind of a big deal to me at the moment. We also have just all kinds of guests. Bobby Vala, who worked on Marvel Legends, the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff, and worked on the G.I. Joe line. He is launching a new 6-inch military toy line, which they have just revealed the first pictures of. And, obviously this guy independently cannot create a Marvel Legend or Star Wars Black Series style G.I. Joe line but that's basically what he's doing. He can't use the characters, but these figures look amazing, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of inspiration taken from G.I. Joe, hopefully Real American Hero. All kinds of awesome guests and artists and people who have been in the toy biz, plus all the dealers. The dealers alone would have been enough to get me out there, but it's really these guests that put me over the top and made me decide that we're going to stay for a couple of days and do everything we can to enjoy the Augusta Toy and Comic Show. So get on Google, check this thing out, see if you're interested, if you're anywhere near the area. I think it's going to be a really awesome show. I'm super stoked about it. And then on Sunday, we will head on to Wilmington, where I will hopefully get some material for future episodes of the Needless Things podcast. I always go there with the intention of getting some cool stuff, and I did get our great Memory Lane Comics episode, but, I get there and I just want a vacation because that's what I'm there for. So I may or may not do some work once we get to Wilmington, but I will definitely be covering the Augusta Toy and Comic Show on social media. So be sure and follow Phantom Troublemaker on Instagram and Twitter. Join the Needless Things podcast Facebook group and Needless Things on Facebook. Give that a like. And remember, find that pinned image of the Bobby Nash giveaway and like it and share it, redo whatever it is you have to do with it. Re-Google it. Can you re-Google things now? You should be able to, I think. But anyway, there you go. That's everything that's going on this week. Now, this wonderful, wonderful week today. Even today's been great. Even though I had to go pick up my car, which was... I was getting the oil changed because I don't do that myself. I'm not car... I hate it. I hate that shit. So I was getting my oil changed, and I was supposed to be getting a new wheel because one of them was bent. And, of course, it turns out that my car has a very odd size and type of wheel, and none of them are available in the state of Georgia. So I'm going to have to get on eBay to buy a wheel for my car, which is ridiculous. But you know what? Even that cannot spoil this wonderful couple of days that I'm having just hanging out with the family, doing fun stuff, reviewing these new Fortnite figures with Phantom Jr., which that review will be up on the site soon. Just good, great times. I hope you and your families are having wonderful times as well, and I hope they last, and I hope we all remember that we can do a lot to make them last. And now it's time for more wonderful times with our pal, the award-winning Bobby Nash. We're going to talk about cartoons. We're going to talk a little bit about the Snow series and just have a great conversation that you guys are going to enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, what a wonderful conversation we are going to have for you on this week's episode of the Needless Things podcast, because it is Toon time, and here to talk to us about cartoons is our pal, award-winning Bobby Nash.
Hey!
Now, Bobby, before we get into Toon talk, we have to discuss what brought us together at this time. What's going on? Tell us about the Snow stories, the Snow series that you've got.
Okay, yeah. Snow is a series that I'm currently in the process of writing. It is an action thriller series. Really, the books are my love letter to the shows I grew up watching, like Magnum P.I. and the Rockford Files and the A-Team. Those that gives you an idea of the kind of stories we're telling. There's a lot of action and a lot of thrillers and gunfights and car chases and just all the stuff that, I grew up loving and I wanted to put in stories. So
and this is a series you've been working on for quite some time now as well.
Yes. Well, it's been a few years, yeah. Because I originally had sold it to a publisher who put out the first one. Then 3 years passed.
Oh.
And then I got my rights. Then I got my rights back, and the rest of them started getting published.
Nice.
But yes, we're up to 4 books now. There will be at least 2 more this year. They come out in paperback, and ebooks, and we're doing collections where we collect 3 at a time, and we're doing hardcovers and paperbacks, but we're also doing audiobooks, which is a new thing for me as a indie publisher to do. And so we started the audiobooks with the Snow series, and I'm working with a fantastic narrator, Stuart Goffey, who is just really, really fantastic. He gives all the characters their own voices and inflections, so even if he wasn't saying Snow said, you would know who it is after you've listened to one of them, because all the characters have their own sounds when he's
yeah.
And he does such a really good job, and he's fantastic, and he's just wonderful, and I can't praise Stuart's work enough. But one of the things we're doing to get the word out, we have the first 4 are available on audio. You can get them through Amazon, Audible. Hey, Audible, you get when you first sign up for Audible, you get free, 2 free. So there's options there. But we also have just this, the most recent release is the Snow Series 1, Volume 1, which collects the first 3 stories, which is Snow Falls, Snowstorm, and Snow Drive, into one collection. And so to get the word out, we're giving away a prize pack. And so we're going to give to one of your Needless Things listeners, we're going to give away a prize pack that includes the audio version of Volume 1, which has all 3 books in it, or the first 3 books in it. And we're going to give them an ebook copy of Snow Falls, which is book 1.
That is awesome. And I was very excited because, anytime I can involve myself in the life of Bobby Nash is a good time. But I was really happy to be able to do some sort of cross-promotional deal here and to get Snow out to the masses.
Absolutely. And as an indie publisher, we're at this great time in our lives where it's easy to get the work out there, but that also means it's easy for everybody to get the work out there. And so we have to, and I don't have the budget of Simon and Schuster or any of those guys, so we have to do whatever we can to get the word out. And I'm very proud of the series. It seems to be one of the most well received by readers of anything I've done. Everybody seems to like it, so I'm hoping to continue them.
Well, I tend to think of it as kind of your signature series.
That seems to be the case, yeah. It seems to be the one most people seem to think of.
Well, cool. We will announce, I will have already announced the contest rules prior to this, and I'll announce them again after the conversation is over. But I'm really excited to be part of this, and I encourage everyone to check out Bobby Nash on the Googles. And actually, let's go ahead and knock it out. We'll do it again at the end of the show, but where can we find you online?
Certainly. Snow is published by my imprint, Ben Books. We actually, so you can go to www.ben-books.com. There's a Snow tab there. It'll give you all the information on Snow, plus my other books that I handle myself. And of course, my website is bobbynash.com, and there's information there. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Facebook is author Bobby Nash. Twitter is @Bobby Nash, and Instagram is @Bobby Nash Writes.
Very cool. Everybody go track down Bobby Nash, check out his stuff, and be sure to leave reviews on anything that you do. Reviews are the most important thing you can do for an independent publisher or for a podcast. And I never push this enough. Please leave reviews on iTunes for us as well.
And if you don't win the contest and you're still interested, like I said, with Audible, you can, if you sign up for Audible for the first time, you get 2 free downloads. If you have Kindle Unlimited, which is a subscription, it's kind of like a Netflix for ebooks, where you pay a subscription and you can read anything that's Kindle Unlimited for free. All of my Ben Books books are free to Kindle Unlimited readers.
Awesome. All right. Now it's Toon time, Bobby Nash.
It's Toon time. I'm very excited. I love me some cartoons.
Well, I've been wanting to record a cartoon-centric episode, and believe me, there will be plenty of these over the years. We did one with Michael Gordon a few years ago that had a little different theme. But I've been wanting to do one lately because my cable carrier, the lovely and wonderful Comcast/Xfinity, stopped carrying Boomerang. Which was my go-to default. Like, when I was a kid, and I've talked about this on the show before, and actually I'm curious to see if you had something like this, Bobby. I would have default channels where when I was doing stuff, I would just put it on, and it was MTV. Like in the 80s when I was a kid, you just left it on MTV. And you'd clean your room, do your homework, whatever. You weren't necessarily engaged in what was on, but it was there. It was like comfort background stuff. And for the past couple of years, Boomerang had been my default channel, that if I was doing things, I just put it on Boomerang, and they'd be showing classic Tom and Jerry, like the Chuck Jones stuff. They had old Looney Tunes, and they'd show some newer stuff too, but for the most part, 24/7, Boomerang had something on that I was interested in. And they pulled it, and now it's no longer accessible. You can still get it through the Boomerang app if you've got like a Roku or whatever, but I'm not paying for a channel when we've got billions of channels already.
Yeah, we have not had Boomerang in my area for quite some time, quite a number of years.
That's tragic.
Yeah. Oddly enough, my default, now I can't have the TV on when I'm writing, but yeah,
Sure.
if I'm cleaning or I'm just milling about doing whatever, defaults for me these days, depending on whether it's during the week or on the weekends, but it's, oddly enough, it's Heroes and Icons or the El Rey Network, because because they're playing all the old stuff I like. They're playing all the Star Treks, or they're playing, the El Rey Network is probably one of the better sci-fi channels we have.
Yeah, El Rey's great.
During the day, you're getting 2 Stargate shows, the Hulk, Knight Rider, A-Team, all the cool stuff I grew up watching. So, yeah, those are kind of if I'm just piddling around, it's on one of those.
I can see Heroes and Icons being much more up your alley. Because, see, it's funny you mentioned that. That was my default channel for a couple of years before it's what I switched to Boomerang. Because a few years ago, I discovered Heroes and Icons. I was sequestered in a hotel for work, and this channel came on. Like, when I got back to the hotel after work, I turned on the TV, and they were playing Star Trek Original Series, then Next Generation, then Deep Space Nine, then Voyager. Yep. And I was like, what is this channel? And then in the morning when I got up to go to work, they were playing Kung Fu, followed by Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yep.
And when I got back home, I was like, I have to find this channel. This is the greatest channel ever. And so not only were they playing all those shows, they were playing Incredible Hulk, Greatest American Hero, Sheena, Swamp Thing. Like, when I first discovered Heroes and Icons, it was much more pop culture nerd stuff. And now it seems like everything is cop shows.
Yeah, they do cop shows during the day, and they do westerns in the morning, cop shows in the day, Star Trek at night, and then the weekends you get a little more. Well, Saturday's like cop shows.
Well, but now Sunday is just they play episodes of what they play during the week.
Yeah, during the day, yeah.
I was so disappointed when they started changing the format like that, because now, like, if you're not interested in what's on Wednesday, then it's no good to you all day, because it's a marathon of that all day long.
Right.
I loved that channel so much when I first found it, and then they changed it. And I guess it's working for them, and good for them, and good for anybody that loves, Numbers,
Jag, Nash Bridges. There's one more.
Yeah.
House.
Yeah. So if you love those shows, it's great. But those aren't my bag, so yeah. I had to find something else. But that's okay, because we're here to talk about the something else. Now, when you were a kid, what was your default channel, or did you have one?
Well, I grew up here in the Atlanta area, and this was yes, kids, I'm old. This was pre-cable. We had, our networks were 2, 5, and 11. 17 was the Superstation, WTBS, before it became the Superstation, and then we had 36 and 46, which were your rerun channels that had all the, and the cartoons.
Yes, dude, Channel 46, was it WXIA, right? I think it's WXIA.
Maybe, yeah.
That just popped into my head. Channel 46 was the one, man. 36 was okay, but 46 was the one.
46 is where you found, I remember, it was cartoons in the mornings, but after school, 46 was what it was for me, because I'd come home, run through your homework real quick before Mom made you go outside for a little while. You could come in, you could watch Star Trek and Dukes of Hazzard and Batman before she ran you out. And so yes, those were, I grew up watching those, and because I'm not an early riser. Even as a kid, not an early riser. I got up early when I had, even Christmas morning, the parents had to come and get me out of bed because it's morning.
Now, see, that was when on school days I didn't get up until I had to get up. As a matter of fact, my mom to this day is still traumatized by the experience of having to get me up every morning. Fortunately, my son is an early riser, and we've never had to deal with that, so that's great. But Saturday mornings, I would get up. I would be up probably 6-ish when the cartoons started. I knew every year, I remember, and tell me if you remember this, every year the new Saturday morning network schedules would come out towards the end of the summer, in the newspaper.
Right, yep.
And you'd look to see what the lineup was on CBS, NBC, and ABC and decide how you were going to flip channels every Saturday morning, because there'd be Mr. T and the T-Force on one channel, but then Rock and Wrestling would be on another channel, but then the Snorks would be on, and you'd figure out, okay, I'm going to be on NBC for an hour, and then I'm going to flip over to CBS because Alf is on, and I don't know if that's accurate. It's probably not. Alf might have been NBC. But you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You'd see what the new cartoons were going to be. Yeah. You'd see what had stuck around and what had been canceled.
Yeah, it was like a military campaign. You planned.
Yes.
This was not something, I'm going to watch TV. No. You planned.
Yeah.
Because if you missed it, you missed it. There was no DVRs, there was no VHS at the time, and these things didn't get rerun for months.
No, and now these kids today, they've got their Cartoon Networks that show Adventure Time, 24/7. And even if you don't catch the episode in one of the several dozen times they run it, you can go on demand and just watch it anytime you want. But back then, if you missed an episode, you had to just hope that maybe 9 months later they'd repeat it.
Mm-hmm. And you had to you timed your bath. You knew how long commercials lasted because you had to get to the bathroom,
yes.
or you had to go get something to drink. You knew I got this long.
Absolutely. And I remember, I haven't thought about this in years, but talking about this right now has brought this memory fresh into my mind. I remember a friend of mine going over to his house, and there was a Wolfman Jack cartoon. Do you remember this?
I do remember the Wolfman Jack
cartoon.
Where he
actually turned into a werewolf.
Yep.
And he would have animated adventures with his teenage friends, which was a very common theme for cartoons back then. One older person like Mr. T or Wolfman Jack who had, for some reason, a group of teenage friends. But
and a lot of them look the same, which we didn't really pay that much attention to then.
Right.
But you realize now it's the same model sheets. They just wore different color shirts.
Yeah. Well, because you go back and you look and you're like, okay, I see all of those cartoons were Hanna-Barbera. All of those were Ruby Spears. All of those were Sunbow, and their character models that carry across. But I remember going to my friend's house and him asking me, "Did you watch Wolfman Jack this past Saturday?" This would have been 1984. 1984. I'm 9 years old. No, wait. Am I 9? 4, 6? No, I'm 8. I'm 8 years old. And no, I didn't get to see it. We had to go. I don't know what we were doing. I didn't see it. He's like, they played the Ghostbusters music video because on the Wolfman Jack cartoon, they would interspersed with the adventures, they would play actual music videos. The real life Wolfman Jack was the host of it too, if I remember.
Yes. He was there at the beginning and at the commercials. Welcome back, and he's in his, because he was a disc jockey during the disco era,
which was
because they had all the lights behind it. It's like he was hosting the cartoon from a club.
Well, and it's even because he was around even prior to that, because if you've got the soundtrack to the American Graffiti movie, Wolfman Jack is in interstitial pieces between the songs, and he actually will talk like I can't listen to Green Onions, the song Green Onions, unless it's got his intro, because he talks about, I'm trying to keep the vampires away. I got green onions hanging all over this place, and then it goes into Green Onions. It's fantastic. So, yeah, Wolfman Jack, and that was another common thing, because you had, again, Mr. T and the T-Force. Mr. T at the end of every episode would I got a lesson for everybody, and I realized my Mr. T and my Wolfman Jack probably sound very similar. But then you had Richard Pryor, had Pryor's Place, and he was part of it. So, like, a lot of sort of adult celebrities had Saturday morning stuff.
In TV shows that continued past the TV era, like, Gilligan's Planet, where the castaways are, kidnapped by aliens and they're like lost in space, or Fonzie, the Happy Days gang had a show. The Dukes of Hazzard had a cartoon. Star Trek had a cartoon.
Well, and I wonder, a lot of that, because this is, if for the listeners, if you're following me on Instagram, on Facebook, on whatever, or if you are checking out Home Again, which is the column I write every single Tuesday about the current Blu-ray and 4K releases, then you know that the new Scooby-Doo movies just came out on Blu-ray. They're gorgeous, but when I was a kid, that was my Scooby-Doo, with Sandy Duncan and Don Knotts and the Harlem Globetrotters and Batman and Robin.
Well, it felt like it was something special, because we had Scooby-Doo during the week, but here's this something special, because not only is it Scooby-Doo, it's whoever the guest was, and it was a big deal for us.
It was huge. And it almost ruined normal Scooby-Doo. Because when you'd see the regular episodes from the 60s come on, you'd be like, wait, why isn't Batman in this one? So when you were a kid, what are, we've talked about, oddly enough, we've started with some more obscure stuff.
Yeah.
What are your earliest cartoon memories?
Well, most of my earliest ones come from the summer, because I would go and stay, when I was a little kid, I would stay with my grandparents during the day, during the summer, while my parents worked. And so that meant getting up early during the summer and going off to my granny's house. And she would turn the TV on and, watch whatever. And my early memories are, things like Scooby-Doo, Fred Flintstone, the Flintstones. But I also remember, now these were in reruns. I'm not quite that old, but
sure.
They would show reruns of the the Hanna-Barbera superheroes, the Johnny Quest and I'm blanking on names now, but the Space Ghost and Herculoids and
Space Ghost and the Galaxy Trio.
Yeah,
right?
Those guys. Yeah, and so I remember watching those, and that was my first introduction to the Fantastic Four and things like that. Those are my earliest memories. Was those and Dick Tracy and things like that, because in the mornings during the summer, they would replay those, and you'd have cartoons on all day, or at least half the day. And so those were my earliest memories. And I think that's where a lot of my love of the superhero or the adventure characters came from, were those early days of, watching these guys fly through space and fight aliens and fight monsters and things like that. And I was intrigued. And then, of course, when you get rushed outside, okay, go outside and play. You go outside and I was by myself. It was just me. So my going out and playing was me imagining myself in the adventures of, these people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So a lot of that, kind of like playing when I know we talked about this with playing with the toys with the Joy of Joe thing, that's where some of the writing stuff came in for me, because I would start writing my own adventures in my head and creating these own things in my head of things just for me to go play.
Well, it inspired us to tell stories.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And it's funny because in all likelihood, my first superheroes were Adam West and Burt Ward.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my earliest and strongest memories of that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think before them, though, for me, probably, if you're talking like modern day superheroes, would have probably been the Super Friends first.
Oh, okay. See, I know, because in my head, I very clear, I don't have, like, the best recall of my youth. There's specific points in time, specific memories that I do remember, like my friend saying, you missed the Ghostbusters video. But I do know for a fact that in my head, that Mego, Batman, and Robin were Adam West and Burt Ward. Even though they weren't, in my head, that's what they were, because that's what I related them to. And the Mego Spider-Man was the old Spider-Man cartoon.
Yes, the 60s Spider-Man cartoon.
Yes.
My mother used to tell this story. Used to embarrass the hell out of me as a kid. But she would go around telling family, friends, whatever, about me. I was still a little kid, but she's talking about me outside playing. She says, "Yep, I don't know what he's doing, but he's running around there," and she's mimicking me, like shooting the webs. And he's running around the backyard going, psh, 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 psh. And so then I'd have to explain to people, I'm being Spider-Man.
Well, it's funny. I've got a similar thing. And this actually ties right into cartoons, because this is one that I feel is almost kind of neglected in modern times, but Popeye.
Yes, I remember Popeye. Yep.
Popeye was a big deal when I was a younger kid, and now he had cartoons sort of through the 80s, but to me none of them ever were quite the same as whichever ones I was watching when I was a kid, which were probably a lot of the 40s theatrical shorts, which
a lot of them were in black and white. I remember most of the Popeyes were in black and white. Yeah.
But I remember one summer when we were staying at a beach house with the whole family, and I'm talking like a dozen or more people all in a beach house. I specifically remember running around playing Popeye.
Mm-hmm.
And I had made probably my granny buy some spinach.
And remember, the spinach, there was a certain brand of spinach that had Popeye on the can.
Yeah, there was Popeye brand spinach. Like, it was literally just Popeye, and it had Popeye on the can, and it was that was it. I don't think I had that. And as a matter of fact, I'm not even sure I had it in a can. I think maybe they had to get some, like, some other kind of, like, frozen spinach, and I don't remember. But I got the spinach, and I was like, it's time to play Popeye. I'm going to eat this spinach, and I'm going to power up and run around with my cousin. And I put the spinach in my mouth and immediately spit it out because spinach is disgusting. And so instead, I got, and I think you can get them like this again now, but back in the early 80s, cheese balls and like Cheetos and stuff came in canisters.
Yes, in cans, yeah.
So I got a can of cheese balls, and I was eating cheese balls instead of spinach. to get strong, which completely goes against what Popeye stands for. But explains a lot about how I look now. But so yeah, I remember running around with my can of cheese balls and going eating up the cheese balls to get strong.
Mm. Plus, I remember we had the like, one of my favorites growing up as a kid was, Tom and Jerry, and
yes,
you could get there would be shows like Tom and Jerry or the Pink Panther. No words spoken for 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh, I love Pink Panther, but you know what my favorite was? The Ant and the Aardvark.
Yes.
I absolutely loved the Ant and the Aardvark. For some reason, that Aardvark just seemed so cool to me.
Mm-hmm. And they were drawn it was a very odd art style, but I loved it.
Well, I was so drawn to those stranger, before I knew who Chuck Jones was,
mm-hmm.
I always loved his Looney Tunes and his Tom and Jerry more than any of the others.
Right.
Because they were always a little weirder, a little more stylized, and just, they like I said, before I knew who he was, I recognized his work. I was like, I see this guy gives it a little something extra.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, those older, and what's funny is the other thing I didn't realize until, maybe 20 years ago or whatever, but that all those old Looney Tunes, all those old Disney cartoons, Tom and Jerry, those were all theatrical shorts.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild to me that we grew up watching those, bundled together in a 30-minute, or let's be realistic, we have commercials, a 22-minute package, the Tom and Jerry show or whatever it may be. But they were all, most of them were originally these high-dollar, carefully animated theatrical shorts that didn't get dumbed down in budget or whatever until later on when they headed to television.
Yeah. Well, that was also the beauty of those. Watching a Tom and Jerry as a kid, I laughed because they were funny. Watching those same Tom and Jerry's as an adult, I laughed, but for a whole different reason. Because there's subtext in those, and the Flintstones was the same way, or a lot of them had subtext where there was stuff there for the adults and stuff there for the kids. And as a kid, you didn't get the jokes, all the jokes,
yeah,
but you got the funny bits.
Yeah.
As an adult, those jokes took on a slightly different meaning, and so it was one of those things. It truly was an all ages appropriate material.
Well, and it's because they were. It's almost the lessons that Pixar has carried forward today. Mm-hmm. Is because they were being shown before theatrical films, they were for general audiences, and general audience, doesn't mean for kids, it means for everyone. And they had to do things like, speaking of what you didn't really get as a kid, anytime Tom or Jerry was trying to woo a female, when you're a kid, you sort of get the general idea of that, mm-hmm. but you don't quite pick up on the nuance. Like, one of my favorite Tom and Jerry's is the one with the zoot suit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about? Where Tom cuts the zoot suit out of the hammock. It's great, and it works if you're a kid because it's Tom and Jerry beating each other up. But if you're an adult, you see this the guy has to peacock a little bit to get the girl's attention. And so all of that stuff that those were all around the 30s and 40s, I think, was the original shorts. And they all have that. They're not dumbed down. They're very smart, mm-hmm. but also very, very broad at the same time.
Well, that was also a period of time where cartoons were not considered just for kids. They were considered for everybody.
Yes.
And then we went to a period where cartoons were just kid stuff. That was the general opinion of things. Not from everybody, but I mean, society as a whole started, cartoons, that's kid stuff.
Well, I think in the 70s, everything got so serious.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at cinema in the 70s, everything is so violent and angry and edgy. And, like, I think that's probably when things changed a little bit. Cartoons moved primarily to television.
Mm-hmm.
And the mood shifted, I guess.
Yeah. But we did get some cool stuff in the 70s.
Oh, for sure. I love the 70s.
You know, and then by the 80s, I know as we get to the 80s, that's when we started getting more, everything's got to have a moral.
Or and also everything has a toy line.
There's a toy line, or there, yeah.
Because, I mean, that's, I love, we go from Tom and Jerry, essentially like Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes, and then we go into Hanna-Barbera in the 60s where we got, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Space Ghost that you were talking about. Like, all that stuff was kind of dominated the 60s. The 70s, where we get some weird stuff, like I think Groovy Ghoulies maybe was 70s. Filmation came into play at that point. And that was when the new Scooby-Doo movies became a thing. I think 74, 75 is when those aired. But then the 80s, to me, the glorious, gluttonous 80s, where all of my favorite He-Man, G.I. Joe, like all of those cartoons that define who I am as a human being, like that's my shit.
Yeah. Now, by the time we got around to the 80s, I was just getting to, because I was born in 71. So by the 80s, I'm 11, 12, starting to get close to teenager age.
You're not supposed to be watching those things anymore.
But in the early 80s, I was still kind of target because I was the target for the toys.
Sure.
Certainly the G.I. Joe cartoon had me definitely in mind.
Yeah.
Because I was at that age where, the toys were from, the kind of thing I wanted. But yeah, it was, but there was some really fun stuff came out of that era.
Yeah, that's when we got, it's the era of, like I said, the toy tie-ins, which started with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. The miniseries, back then, every show launched with a 5-episode miniseries that they could run Monday through Friday, and then later on cut into a special feature that they would show on like Saturday or Sunday night. G.I. Joe started with a miniseries, and all the Sunbow cartoons, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Humanoids, all started with a 5-episode miniseries.
And you know what? The extra bit, it felt special because of that.
Yes, absolutely.
And this was an event. I remember the week that, especially G.I. Joe, I remember the week G.I. Joe premiered with their event. It's one episode, 30-minute episode a day. And it, by God, I had to be home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was no missing G.I. Joe for me. I mean, as certainly as you know, and as most of the listeners probably know, G.I. Joe is my, like, it's my central dorkery that all other dorkery is built around. Like, even probably over Star Wars, I love G.I. Joe. Mm-hmm. And when they would do a miniseries, because they had 3, if I'm remembering correctly, and I didn't make notes on this, and my poor old brain is just sad. They had the show, but then they had the Weather Dominator.
Yeah, that was the first miniseries. The Weather Dominator. Was that right?
I believe that's correct. They had Revenge of Cobra, which was the mass device, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then they had
Then it went into the show. Then it was like regular episodes.
Yes. And then it had, later on, they did the Serpentor.
The Search for Serpentor was like a 5-parter.
And that, all of those, got turned into special events where they would show all the episodes, like they'd cut the whole thing together into like a feature. But originally they were shown, like we said, Monday through Friday. And
unlike regular cartoons, I mean, they had... Come back tomorrow. Here's some scenes for tomorrow. I mean, they were like they're teasing the next, whereas most cartoons, when they went off, well, they're done till tomorrow. I mean, they wanted to make they played these up as huge events, and they were. To me, that having to rush home to see those, and that was my first encounter with that animation style too that G.I. Joe and Transformers all had, which to me is an amazing animation style.
It's interesting you bring up that animation style because I hadn't even thought about this prior to us recording right now, but in my notes that I made, I totally overlooked something very, very important, and that is Voltron, G-Force, Battle of the Planets.
That's funny. I was just thinking about those.
which to me, Transformers and G.I. Joe are almost descendants of that cartoon style because they're not anime, but they have that flavor,
right?
That hyper real sort of flavor. It's not Tom and Jerry, it's not the Gummy Bears, but it is portraying reality in an animated sense. Yeah. And Battle of the Planets was the one with the bird people. Also known as G-Force.
Right.
And then obviously everybody knows Voltron at this point because Netflix's Voltron show was the revival was fantastic.
And there were two different versions of Voltron.
Yeah, well, I think there were more than two, but the two main ones were the lions and the vehicles.
But they also, those started us on this thing, too, of stories that went beyond single episode stories.
Yes, that actually had arcs.
Yeah, that was the first cartoon I remember watching where the story continued through multiple episodes. And, for me, that was awesome because I was not used to that. I was watching, because before stuff like that, when I got my superhero fix, it was watching things like the 80s Spider-Man or the 80s Fantastic Four or Spider-Woman, those things. And it was one episode, story's done, reset, next week, one episode, story's done. They were all one-offs. So it was nice to see that. You can also have that villain be a bigger threat because it was a threat that took more than 30 minutes to fix.
Well, and that... and I'm trying to look up right now. There was another one. The actual name is Space Battleship Yamato.
Oh, Robotech.
No.
No, not Robotech.
This is different from Star Blazers.
Star Blazers, yes.
Star Blazers. That was another one of the ones that I saw early on. Transor Z was another one. There was a lot of that anime that made its way over to America in syndication.
Yeah, Star Blazers to me was kind of my Star Trek fix in cartoon form.
Yeah, I loved all of those shows. I really dug them. And, at the time we had no idea it was imported from Japan. It was just like, wow, look at this cool outer space stuff.
Yep.
And then, talking about things that descended from actual anime. We had G.I. Joe, we had Transformers. We could do whole episodes on those. But then you also had things like Thundercats, Silverhawks, Tiger Sharks that really were more directly descended from that kind of stuff, it seemed.
Yeah, or there was one, what was it called? There was one that was about it was on another planet.
Brave Star?
Brave Star. It was about the Marshal that comes into the planet Texas.
Yes, Brave Star, which was Filmation. And, of course, had the tie-in toy line by Mattel.
It kind of had that He-Man feel to the animation.
It was a Lou Shamer production. It was Filmation. It was the same. All of the same people that did He-Man did Brave Star. And actually, there was a big push a few years ago to include Brave Star or do a sort of offshoot toy line of the Masters of the Universe Classics line.
Oh, okay.
But do Brave Star, and I believe me, I supported that 100% because Brave Star, Tex-Hex, all of those character designs were fantastic.
Well, because I remember the one that really stands out for me, because I did have this toy, if I remember correctly, was the horse he rode. If you got off the horse,
gun.
The horse would stand up on 2 feet and had guns.
Yes.
And it was just a cool transforming toy with just a couple of twists. He's really tall and he's got big guns in each hand and he looks cool, and was like, yeah, that was really fun stuff.
Yeah, that was a fantastic concept that I think came in. If they had introduced it just a couple of years earlier, I think it would have taken off a little bit better.
Yeah, I think Silverhawks had the same problem. I think timing was their issue because they didn't last very long either.
Well, and there were so many shows like that got like one season. And now, granted, back then, one season of a cartoon was 65 episodes.
True.
So if you're a fan of like Silverhawks or something like that, you've got plenty of material. And you've got a really, looking back at some of those 80s toy lines, I love the fact that, yes, it would be expensive if you suddenly one day decided, you know what, I want to own all the Silverhawks toys. But it's a very limited, like you don't have a whole lot you have to buy.
Right.
I kind of like all those like one series and done experiments that you got in the 80s, like in Humanoids, which was a Sunbow cartoon, toy line produced by Hasbro, that one of my favorite toy lines ever, but there's just one series, and that's all there is to it.
And then there was Mask, which tried to be it's part G.I. Joe, part Transformers.
Best of both worlds, my friend.
Yeah. And they all had cool little intros with the music and the way they animate, because they put a little extra oomph into the animation on the intros.
Isn't it funny how most of those intros, like that animation, it's just a notch better?
Yeah,
it's so funny.
Because man, all the G.I. Joe intros are absolutely fantastic.
Well, I mean, the greatest, the live action animation, anything at all, the greatest intro of all time is G.I. Joe the movie. Mm-hmm. That's it. There's nothing that's even half as cool as that. Oh my gosh, that song is incredible.
That battle at the Statue of Liberty is just so beautiful.
Phenomenal. Which, speaking of miniseries, that was intended to be a theatrical release, and after Transformers and My Little Pony kind of tanked, they just sent it straight to miniseries, and then I think maybe it got a Sunday night feature showing, and then subsequent viewings they would just do it as a miniseries like they did with the other 5-parters.
Yeah, it's so funny. In one of the best things about my job, and I get to meet I've made interesting, cool connections and met new people and made cool friends, and I've gotten to know a couple of the writers who worked on these things, and so being able to talk to like Buzz Dixon or Flint Dille about
oh my gosh
writing the movie and why did this get changed, and we've had some fantastic conversations, or I've asked really cool questions and things like that. It's like holy shit, I didn't know you wrote for Thundar. That's awesome. I have questions.
Now are you and you may not be, because it may not be totally in your field, I guess. Are you going up to Augusta for the toy and comic show in a couple weeks?
I think I'm going to go up for a day. Yeah, just go up and go for a day. And
dude,
and check out the guest list. How can I not?
Right? Well, that was my thing. Is we were planning a trip to Wilmington to see my parents, and Augusta it's not a halfway point, but it's on the way to Wilmington. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to see this Augusta toy and comic show. And oh my gosh, like the toy show, the toy vendors alone were enough where I was like, cool, maybe we'll stop there for a day. But then you look at the guest list, and it's like all the biggest names that worked on G.I. Joe, not just the toy line, but also Larry Hama from the comic book. Just wow, it's crazy. Ron Rudat, who worked on G.I. Joe and on the WWF Hasbro line. And then it's crazy. The guest list is amazing. Like, it's worth the trip just for that. Like, even if we weren't going to Wilmington, I'd go up there for this thing.
And back when G.I. Joe was on, you didn't know who was voicing all the characters at the time. I mean, it's not like
you didn't realize one guy was voicing like a dozen people.
Right. It's not like by the time you get to Batman the Animated Series where they had a cast list. But I remember, this is like, it floored me when I saw the guest list for this convention, and I'm looking it up, and I had not realized that Keon Young was Storm Shadow.
Right.
Because I've loved him in other things. You know, he's Mr. Wu on Deadwood, you know. And to find out that he's Storm Shadow, that it's just, you know, it blew my mind. Or to see, you know, over the years, obviously, you get to know these things as you get older, and you see them around doing other things. Like the guy that was Duke, you know, I've seen him in other things, and it's like, oh my God, it's that guy.
Well, and Hank Garrett, who was Officer Ed on Car 54, Where Are You, and has been in countless other things, and also voiced Dial Tone on G.I. Joe.
Yep.
Like, what a wild career path so many of these guys have had, and that's the thing, is back in that era, you know, going from the 50s to the 80s, I guess that's like 3 eras, but you know what I mean, acting was work.
Yeah.
Like, these guys weren't necessarily always celebrities. They were people looking for jobs.
Right, and you weren't always... And there was a time, too, when working in TV was, you know, you kind of look down on that. Oh, if you're working in TV, it's because you're not good enough to work in movies. And if you're doing voice work, that means you're not good enough to be an actor. And that, you know, that's totally changed. Those perceptions are totally gone these days. And a lot of these voice actors are now realizing that there is demand for people to meet them. Because people like us who grew up going, oh my God, these people were such an...
funniest thing to me is a few years ago at Wizard World here in Atlanta, one of the gentlemen that wrote for the original Masters of the Universe cartoon was there. He had, or actually, you know what? He may have been an animator. Off the top of my head, because I hadn't planned on discussing this, off the top of my head, I cannot remember exactly what part he took, but he worked on the original cartoon. And we talked to him for a little bit, and he said, I had no idea people were interested in this.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a funny bit. There was a show last year that was in North Carolina. It was mostly anime voice actors were a lot of the guest list. Because it was a toy-themed show, and so they were interviewing some of the guests and putting out videos to before the con. And they had Alan Oppenheimer on there, who, of course, is Skeletor.
Yeah.
Among his many other credits of being in, like, the $6 Million Man, et cetera, et cetera. So he's talking about being Skeletor, and he's like, in the interview, he mentions that he talks to the guy that voiced He-Man quite frequently. And he's like, I am trying like crap to get this guy to come to shows. And I tell him, like, dude, come to the show. And he's like, nobody cares. He's like, man, I tell you what, if you come to the show, there will be a line around the building to meet He-Man. And it's just, but it's one of those things, but it's kind of the mindset. And a lot of the older actors took them a while to get out of that when conventions became a bigger thing. Because like you said, it was a job. You weren't expecting people to care later. And yeah, so I'm loving meeting these guys that, you know, were such a big part of my youth, you know. I was a big, you know, because you could be a big fan of these guys and never know who they were, you know.
Well, and what's great to me is out of the writers, voice actors, animators that I have met, none of them poo-poo that work.
Right.
They all, you know, while it was just a job, I've never met a one that says, oh, that was just some bullshit I did back in the day. Like, they're all, you know, they may not take it as seriously as we do, but they're always appreciative of your attention. Mm-hmm. There's never an attitude of, I don't know why you care about this junk. Like, they've all been very cool and very happy to talk about what they do.
Yeah. That's been my experience as well. And because over the years I've got to meet a lot of them, you know, from doing cons and stuff. And you know, I mean, the coolest thing, having a conversation with you know, with Optimus Prime and Megatron sitting next to each other. You know, or, you know, I've gotten to know Samantha Newark over the years, who was the voice of Jim from Jim and the Holograms.
Yes.
You know, and sometimes you'll be talking, and you get to know them as them, and you know, you kind of forget that. But then every once in a while, they'll say something, and it's in that right voice or that right tone, and you're like, holy shit, that's Optimus Prime. Or, you know. And it's just it's one of those really just cool things. And yeah. And when we got all that because we loved these cartoons.
So let me, I've got a couple more things. We didn't even make it to the 90s and to the Disney afternoon, and that's okay because that'll be a whole other Toon Time episode.
Man, I could do 2 hours on Batman the Animated Series by itself.
Right. Well, and you know what? Those may be Batman the Animated Series and the Marvel shows, because because I am a badass. For the listeners, if you don't know, I have talked to the creator, John Simper Jr., who was the showrunner for Spider-Man the Animated Series, and I also talked to the showrunners for the X-Men Animated Series. Those are two separate episodes that you can check out on the Needless Things podcast. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. But I want to do fan episodes about those Marvel shows.
And right now the X-Men cartoon, especially this particular week, has been in the news a lot because people are going, man, the cartoon did a better Dark Phoenix version.
Yes, it absolutely 100%, I'm sure. Well, okay, yeah. Look. I can't say it totally did because I have not seen Dark Phoenix because I don't care to see Dark Phoenix. Yeah. It doesn't look interesting to me. A grounded version of the Dark Phoenix story sounds like the dumbest thing since, like, rubber bread. And I don't even know what that means, but I just threw out the dumbest thing I could think of in the moment. But anyway, yeah, that X-Men animated series is rightfully revered by fans. And
that one and the 90s Spider-Man series with the animated version that had the multiple story arcs. And good.
That's the one, John Simper Jr., which you can find him on the Needless Things podcast, was the showrunner for that, and he's essentially the father of the modern animated style because he was the guy that said we can do these story arcs that run an entire season. We can have these characters coming in and out. This guy essentially invented the Spider-Verse.
Right.
Back in the day. So this is, the Marvel animation of the 90s deserves its own episode because you also had the Iron Man animated show. You had the Fantastic Four show.
Both of those. The first season of those were a little clunky, but the second seasons of both are fantastic.
Yes, they got into the groove. They figured out what they were doing. But that's a show for another day.
Yeah. Like I said, I can talk about those for hours.
Right, exactly. For right now, we'll cut things off in the 80s, but I want to ask you if you remember a show called Cops and Crooks.
I remember one called Cops. I don't know if Cops and Crooks doesn't ring a bell.
Again, because we're talking about the 80s, it had a tie-in toy line by Hasbro. They were 6-inch figures instead of 3 3/4-inch, which was a huge deal back then. And it was fighting crime in a future time.
Okay, that is what I'm thinking about.
Yes, it was technically called Cops and Crooks.
Okay.
And it was C period, O period, P period, S period. And I do not remember what that stood for. I'm sure it was something extremely clever. A lot of voice talent from G.I. Joe. It was a Sunbow cartoon again. Or no, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it might have been Deke. I can't remember if it was Deke or Sunbow. But I loved the toy line. It was very advanced for its time. The action features were very cool. The show, I don't have as many memories of the show, and I recently found out why. You can go on Amazon right now, or go on your favorite. I'm actually mad at Amazon right now. I'm not going to say Amazon. You can go to Best Buy, Target, any of your favorite online resources. What is it, deepdiscount.com? Isn't that one of them?
Yep.
And you can purchase the entire series of Cops and Crooks, which I think is just one season, for under $10, I believe, on DVD. I did this, and I regretted it within the first 10 minutes of the first episode. It is so bad. The tone, G.I. Joe, you can look at things like the Dreadnoks and the Fatal Fluffies and whatever else, and it's a little goofy at times, but in general, it took itself seriously.
Yes.
Same thing with Transformers. Cops and Crooks is so goofy and silly. It's almost like it's aimed at a younger demographic than G.I. Joe, Transformers, Silverhawks, all the ones that we've talked about. And man, it let me down. Do you remember the cartoon at all?
Not a bit.
It's such a good concept and such a poor execution. Do you have any memories from the 80s or the 70s even of a cartoon that you were really excited about that kind of just didn't deliver for you?
Well, you know, there's some I watched. There's some I watched then that, looking back on them now, I go, "Why did I like this?" But at the time, if it wasn't working for me, I generally just flipped it over to something else. But nothing springs to mind.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I can't remember a whole lot that as a kid let me down. I know one of my big issues was the youthful sidekick. Mm-hmm. I didn't like Matt Tracker's son and his little buddy T-Bob from Mask. I never liked Snarf. I never liked Orko. Like, I always hated that little dumb sidekick character that caused half the problems that the main characters had to deal with.
Yeah, the show would have been so much better if it had just killed Snarf.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. I never liked those kinds of characters. Yeah. And I think that is a big difference in the animation of that era and the animation of today, is that, you know, now people our age are creating the cartoons of today. Mm-hmm. And in the 80s, a lot of it was marketing. You know, people can be overly cynical and say, "Oh, G.I. Joe was just a commercial for a toy line," and that's not true. It was more than that.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was a point in time where it became I forget the organization. It was the Children's something television. You know, where they came down on the cartoons, and there was a period where. And I noticed it because I liked the comic books, and I'm looking at the comic book shows where I noticed that Spider-Man could never actually punch anybody in the 70s.
You know, I never noticed any of that. I never thought about the fact that, until I got older. In the late 80s, when the Ninja Turtles were bonking people instead of cutting them with their swords.
Right.
That stood out to me. But, when I was a kid, I never noticed He-Man not actually punching people. I never thought about it then.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the ones where it stood out were when they were doing stuff that I saw in other formats. Like when they started doing remember there were Star Wars cartoons. There was Ewoks and droids.
Sure.
And it's nobody ever got blasted. And Star Wars is full of people getting blasted.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Things like that where it's just something's different here, and it took me a little while to put my finger on what's different. Oh yeah, and I'm a little older than you, so it was. I think at the time I was starting to get to that age where I was starting to phase out for a bit.
Sure.
Where I was getting around 12, 13, started realizing that girls weren't icky,
Right.
And so my tastes were moving out of cartoons, and I was starting to notice these things because I was also at an age where I was watching movies like Die Hard, and
and that's a very interesting thing to point out because, and this is a whole other episode we could record, that 5-year difference between you and me, when I was 12 and 13. And I should have been aging out of that stuff. What came along in 1989, Batman, and in 1990, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Which to me are, and yes, I understand Tim Burton's Batman is not a particularly faithful representation of the Batman comic book, but I love that movie. Mm-hmm. and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I think is one of the best comic book adaptations of all time. Those two movies came along, were, obviously Batman was accepted by the entire world.
Yeah.
In a way that very few other movies have ever been. And then Ninja Turtles came along, and because it was based more on the comics and really had nothing to do with the much, much sillier cartoon show, it kind of kept me in. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, because those are both violent, edgier, and I hate the word edgy, but you know what I mean here. Mm-hmm. Edgier movies that were still very comic booky and fantastical.
Right.
So right when I might have otherwise found interest in other things, these two things came along to keep me invested in these sort of more fanciful worlds.
I think that's kind of where I started coming back into it, because this is something, as we're talking about dates here, it makes me think. 1989 was the year I graduated high school. I'm no longer surrounded by people that are going to make fun of me for going, hey, did you watch Batman?
Right.
So I wonder if subconsciously, knowing that you don't have that, where, I'm free, I'm an adult, I can do whatever the hell I want to, that does play a role,
Yeah, that stigma is gone.
Yeah.
And now you can be interested in whatever you want to be interested in.
Yeah. And the peer pressure thing kind of goes away. I do find it so funny that, like, in years after high school, where as this type of entertainment became more mainstream, where I meet people who back then used to make fun of me for liking these things, or asking me questions about Star Trek, or asking me questions about Thor, and I'm like, no. Go away, you geek. But but it's just like, it's funny that how it comes around now, and it's like, well, I like this stuff when it wasn't cool to like this stuff. Yeah. Now that it's cool to like this stuff, sometimes I'm not cool enough to like it anymore. And I was like, wait a minute, these are my fandoms. I was here first. I don't care if you come in and enjoy it, but I'm not going away.
Yeah, you're not. Well, and that's that gatekeeper mentality.
Yeah.
That as with many other things we've discussed, is a whole other episode. So to wrap things up, looking back, if you had to pick a favorite sort of classic cartoon character, or even just cartoon, like when we go back and we're talking about Popeye, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, like sort of that era, and you had to pick Hanna-Barbera era, and you had to pick an 80s era, if you had some favorites from those, because I feel like those are the theatrical shorts of Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and then the Hanna-Barbera, the televised stuff of the 70s, and then the big market 80s. If you had to pick some favorites from those eras, what would they be?
I'd go with Looney Tunes first for the classic era.
Now, do you have a favorite specific character or shorts? Because they had Foghorn Leghorn, Wile E. Coyote, Bugs Bunny.
I'm a big fan of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, and anything with Yosemite Sam in it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if Yosemite, like anytime Yosemite Sam showed up, I'm there. So those two would be the Looney Tunes highlights. 70s, just because it had such an impact on me, I would go with, and I'm going to lump these two together because they kind of were together. Mm-hmm. We had a Hanna-Barbera Spider-Man and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends that were on at the same time.
Yeah.
And I loved, big Spider-Man fan. Spider-Man is what got me into comics.
Dude, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends is one of the seminal greatest cartoons of all time.
Yeah, and it was also brilliant because it started introducing me to other parts of the Marvel Universe I didn't know.
Yeah, dude, Dracula was on it.
Yeah. Captain America's in this episode.
And those
here's
Stan
the
Lee.
X-Men.
Those Stan Lee. Guess what, true believers? Oh my gosh, that narration by Stan. I didn't know who he was at the time, but I loved it.
And that's part of why, because sometimes I meet people now that only know Stan because of his stuff with the movies.
Right.
It's like, you don't understand. Stan was like our uncle,
And he was, and we didn't even really know who he was at the time. But he was that friendly voice who was so excited to introduce us to Spider-Man's adventures.
Right. If I wasn't excited about the episode, because I hadn't seen it yet, I was excited for it just from his intro telling me to be excited for it. And he had a way of making you feel like no matter what you were about to watch or read, it was going to be the most enjoyable 20 minutes of your life.
And you felt like you were in on it.
Yes.
He made everyone feel like sort of a family.
Yes.
Like you were. It's important that everybody enjoys this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, he had such an energy, even just as a disembodied voice in Spider-Man's weird world. He had such power and such energy.
Yeah, and those even though it's not, you could certainly show those episodes without that, but it loses something.
Yeah, he gave them a very unique flavor and character.
Yeah, and I certainly we could talk about Stan for hours too, but he's been, there are those who feel like he's just a huckster, but you know what? Part of that huckstering is why Marvel became what Marvel became.
Absolutely.
There's an old story, and this is just a quick aside.
Sure.
Where in talking with people that worked because after a while, Stan kind of stepped away from the comics and was working for Marvel TV throughout the late 80s and early 90s, and he's trying to get shows off the ground. And I watched this documentary about the making of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I found it on YouTube. Pretty fascinating. You should look it up.
Yeah.
But anyways, in the process of this, they're talking about Stan was involved. He would be there meeting with the writers, making sure things were going well and, doing his bit. And the guy was like, yeah, this is my job. I work on Spider-Man. Stan would come in. He'd work on us for his bit. And then Stan would go gather up all of the stuff that he would take. And he was every day he was at movie studios and TV shows trying to pitch Marvel. And for years, with no one giving a crap. No one cared. But Stan was out there every day. And the fact that now that Marvel movies are such a big deal, I'm glad Stan lived long enough to see that happen.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it happened because he was out there beating the bushes all those years.
You go online, and you can find people willing to be negative about anything.
Sure.
So, of course, there are people who want to be negative about Stan Lee, but regardless of his creative input, which, by the way, was massive, regardless of his editorial direction and skills, which, by the way, were powerful and important, he got Marvel through. Even Jim Shooter, who's one of the most practical businessmen to ever also be a creative individual, even Jim Shooter gives Stan Lee tons of credit for the success of Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy, he's not, I don't, if you've ever read anything that Jim Shooter has written, as far as his recollections of Marvel or his, I'm not talking about his stories, but just his, during the days when he ran Marvel, things that he's written about it, he's very straightforward. He doesn't pull punches, but he also doesn't bury people. This guy talks about how important Stan Lee is. And there's no way around Stan Lee being a critical piece and deserving every bit of credit he gets from the MCU and from any other source for what Marvel is today.
Yeah. And, and Yeah, and you know what? And I know a lot of people will go, well, poor Jack gets left out, and that's true.
Sure.
But I have to think if Jack Kirby were alive today, he would be those cameos would be Stan and Jack cameos.
Absolutely.
For a lot of these.
Absolutely.
Because Jack Kirby was, he understood the filmmaking process too from all his work and working on cartoons and whatnot. So Jack, and I think if Jack were alive, I think he would be he would be out there hyping these movies. He would certainly be doing cameos in these movies, and deservedly so.
Well, and that's the thing is people can't seem to say Jack and Stan were both great.
Right.
So many people feel like they have to, in order to celebrate Jack. Right. In order to celebrate Jack, you have to take away from Stan. Well, that's not how life works.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been a comic fan for a long time, and I know we got off topic there. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I've been a comic fan since I was a kid, so I've been a comic fan for decades, and I love Stan Lee's work, and I love Jack Kirby's work. And as a fan of both, I will say this, to me as a reader, Stan and Jack, separate, never reached the heights that Stan and Jack together creatively were. They were never as good apart, to me as a reader.
Sure.
As they were together. There was magic that when you mixed in the equal parts of Stan and Jack, there was magic that happened that didn't necessarily happen when they weren't together. Not to say they were bad when they were apart.
Yeah.
But they weren't as there was something special when it's like Lennon and McCartney were great separate, but you put Lennon and McCartney together, you get the Beatles.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. So my 80s would be Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and a large part of that is just because that's really where I got to know a lot of the Marvel Universe. 80s, I would go, 70s for that. 80s, I would go with, obviously I'm going to go with G.I. Joe because it had such an impact on me. It's a dream goal. I want to write G.I. Joe one day. I've tried. I haven't got there, but it's a goal, and it has to do with that cartoon.
Yeah, that was between the cartoon, the comic book, and Larry Hama's biographies for the characters. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that's the source of my love for storytelling. Even though the cartoon and the comic books were very, very different things. It was a world I was able to really sink my teeth into and get invested in.
Absolutely. And there's such a rich wealth there's a wealth of characters there that don't get the attention they deserved. And I understand a lot of the shows, which characters were in the shows were really at the whim of Hasbro.
Right.
Not so much the writers going, okay, I want to do a kick-ass shipwreck and snow job episode. It's like, no, here, you've got these guys.
Well, and that's why we have Quick Kick in the Arctic.
Yes, with no coat.
Right.
So there was weird stuff like that, but I love the concept of that, it's almost like it's a Mission Impossible with almost like superheroes, because they all have the colorful costumes.
Right. Well, and their specialized skill sets.
Yeah. And so it's very much that Mission Impossible feel where, Hawk or Duke, whichever one, one is in charge that week, goes in and goes, we've got this problem. Who do I need? And he pulls up the 5 he needs and goes, great, go solve this problem.
Right.
And it's fantastic that you can solve any kind of problem with the characters at hand without having to create more. But then they keep creating more, so there's a wealth of them,
including the threat of the Viper.
Yes,
the Viper is coming to Viper the windows. I love it. Bobby Nash, we got to wrap this thing up.
Woo, this was fun. This was a nice jaunt down memory lane. I haven't thought about some of these shows in a while.
And we barely scratched the surface. I think we will absolutely be revisiting this topic in the near future.
Yes, I'm sure as soon as we get off here, I'm going to go, oh, crap, I forgot to mention Yeah.
No, that's literally podcasting, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that is at least 80% of what we do is the after show. Oh, shit, I forgot this. But before we go, one more time, what are you up to? Where can we find you online?
Okay. Well, I'm constantly writing. I do want to mention the snow prize pack one more time for one lucky listener. We'll have all the pertinent details here in the show notes, and so check out Snow at benbooks.com, which is BEN-books. You can find me at bobbynash.com. I'm on Facebook at author Bobby Nash. I'm Bobby Nash on Twitter, and Bobby Nash Writes on Instagram. And I post a few things every day, so come by, say hi. I've kind of cut back on cons this year. I am planning to do the Augusta show at least one day. I won't be set up there, but I'll be walking around. If you see me, say hi. Who knows? May even, and you'll probably do this too, I'm sure, we'll probably even have a couple of Joya Joes tucked into a bag with me if you're interested in them. So.
Yeah, that's right. We are published together, Bobby Nash.
Yes.
For eternity.
Awesome. We have Joe, so.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, for talking about cartoons, and I look forward to seeing you in like a week in Augusta.
Yes, as I'm looking forward to it. Should be a fun time.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. See you, man.
I forgot to mention, part of the reason that for my improved demeanor is probably that I've gotten out and started walking again. Those of you that are longtime listeners know that usually in the early part of the year, sometime around March and carrying through September, I will get in the habit of going and walking at the park. And when I say walking, I'm not like moseying. This is a determined, powerful walk. But I'll go to the park and walk every day that I can, thanks to my work schedule. That is not every day, but I do it a lot. And I know mentally I'm much more positive. I have more motivation for generally everything in life when I get out and do that as often as I can. And definitely that's what's going on right now is I love getting out to the park, walking around, seeing my geese pals. There's a crane or something out there this year, which is really wild. But that's definitely a help too. So, I mean, anything that you can do to get out and do something, I think is positive. And it doesn't necessarily, I mean, obviously you should exercise, but it doesn't even have to be exercise. Just get out there. And I also, please go check out Needless Things on Instagram, or Needless Things Podcast on Instagram. I just posted, so it'll be gone by the time you even hear this, but I did an unboxing of some new Coke that I ordered because of the Stranger Things Season 3 tie-in. And I don't know. I still think unboxings are stupid. I don't know how I feel about it. What do you guys think? Leave a comment somewhere. I'll see it. Needless Things Podcast Facebook group, on the WordPress site on needlessthingspodcast.com. Maybe don't leave it on Old Needless Things, because I probably won't see it there. I love you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Needless Things podcast. You're the best. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, or in the ears of a Trader Vic's employee. Love you. Mean it. Uh-huh.